Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and Voxiversity. So tonight we're going to do something we haven't done before, and I'm going to introduce to those of you who haven't seen it yet the Voxiversity 007 video, and it's entitled The Madness of Jordan Peterson. And I think if you are a Jordan Peterson fan, you are probably not going to like this too terribly much. If you have doubts about the man, and if you have some concerns about the man, I think that you're going to find that this demonstrates very clearly the reason that you had those doubts, as well as confirmation for your skepticism. And so what we're going to do is I'll show the video. It takes about 15 minutes. And then I'll go ahead and take any questions and discuss it. And if you're interested in supporting Voxiversity, we can talk about how that's possible too. So without further ado, I will go ahead and launch Voxiversity, The Madness of Jordan Peterson. Okay, this is kind of annoying. It doesn't seem to want to work. I wonder why it was just working before we started. All right, I will load it up here again. This will just take a second. Yeah, let me pop the cover up just real quick so that people are not confused as to what's going on.
We are live with a man who I think at this point needs no introduction.
The most influential public intellectual in the Western world.
One of the world's most controversial thinkers.
Hi.
Jordan Peterson.
Professor Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson.
Peterson gained national notoriety when he spoke out about a federal bill on gender expression.
I am not going to be a mouthpiece for language that I detest, and that's that.
His new self-help book, 12 Rules for Life, is already a bestseller. Hundreds of thousands subscribe to his online lectures, his speeches regularly attract protests, and his new speaking tour is selling out.
It feels like a movement, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Dr. Peterson has changed my life. He has reminded me that I should first and foremost clean my room.
Tell us about the lobster.
Well, that's quite a segue.
I think the whole group identity thing is seriously pathological.
Just get this straight. You're saying that we should organize our societies along the lines of the lobsters.
The way that you deal with this is to put yourself together.
We don't need to be taught how to wipe our ass by Jordan Peterson.
What good is a clean room in Rome going to do when Alaric the Goth is sacking your city?
The group identity emerge only when necessary, and
they're trying to come up with a way to keep the right on the reservation. And that's what Jordan Peterson is doing in the world of philosophy, which I call Jordanetics, is ultimately anti-Christian, it's poisonous, and it's riddled from start to finish with mental illness. This guy is the crazy Christ. I mean, he has a Messiah complex. He actually wrote to his father and said,
I think I've discovered something that no one else has any idea about.
It's clear that we're not dealing with somebody who is mentally well.
When it was literally driving me crazy, often dreaming extremely violent dreams. What shall I do with my newfound hand of glory? I waited for a reply, and almost immediately an answer revealed itself.
Write down the words you want inscribed on your soul.
I'm a media whore, you know.
The Madness of Jordan Peterson. Although I had heard about a Canadian academic who became an unexpected hero to American conservatives through his YouTube videos and a best-selling self-help book, I did not pay Jordan Peterson any notice until it was brought to my attention that he was repeating exaggerated and long disproven claims about the intelligence of a minority group.
The average Ashkenazi IQ is somewhere between 110 and 115, which is about 1 standard deviation above the population average.
While anyone can be misled by unreliable sources, what made me suspicious of his intellectual integrity was the way that he immediately doubled down and resorted to name-calling and disingenuous rhetoric when called out for his error by his better-informed readers. The way in which I was energetically denounced by his fans and accused of everything from jealousy to mental retardation for the heinous crime of publicly correcting him only made me more dubious about the man. It didn't take very long to discover that the man was something very, very different than the public figure whom conservatives were praising so highly.
What do you think are the things that people, and I'm especially thinking of your opponents, get wrong about you?
Their basic proposition is that, first of all, that I'm a right-winger of some sort, and that's just not the case.
Virtually nothing that is believed to be true about Jordan Peterson is actually true. Jordan Peterson is not a Christian. Jordan Peterson is not a conservative. Jordan Peterson is not a defender of Western civilization or Western culture. Jordan Peterson is not post-ideological. Jordan Peterson is not a hero. Jordan Peterson is not a right-winger of any sort. Jordan Peterson is not a prophet. Jordan Peterson's thoughts are not too advanced for ordinary people to follow. And most importantly, most of the time, Jordan Peterson simply does not know what he's talking about.
The hell do I know?
Nirmal Das, a Canadian author and PhD who specializes in translating ancient languages, observes that Jordan Peterson is poorly educated and lacks a basic knowledge of religion, history, theology, philosophy, science, and logic. He writes, "He misconstrues the Logos and blasphemes his way through the Old Testament and the Gospels. As for history, just one example suffices. No, Jesus is not a version of the Egyptian god Osiris. This nonsense comes from Gerald Massey, a 19th century crackpot who faked evidence to make such claims.
Keep talking, bucko. Pretty soon I'm going to have you right where I want you."
This comprehensive charge of general ignorance may sound difficult to believe.
And I've always felt like a complete idiot.
So there, I've got my quack-quack-a-whack.
But remember, Jordan Peterson admitted that he had never even read through the entire Bible before he began delivering his series of lectures on it.
Jesus, what the hell did I do?
The readily observable fact is that very few Jordan Peterson fans have ever taken any trouble to actually read what he has written. Unlike most of his fans, I've read the 12 Rules, Maps of Meaning, and the United Nations Secretary General's high-level panel on global sustainability, Resilient People, Resilient Planet, A Future Worth Choosing. And I can attest that the charge of comprehensive ignorance is an accurate one. For example, throughout the entire 564 pages of Maps of Meaning, there are precisely 0 direct references to such minor intellectual figures as Aristotle, Socrates, Epictetus, Augustine, Marcus Aurelius, and Thomas Aquinas. By way of example, no man even remotely familiar with the Greek and Roman skeptics could possibly have produced such an incredibly ignorant statement as this.
Prior to the time of Descartes, Bacon, and Newton, man lived in an animated spiritual world, saturated with meaning, imbued with moral purpose.
But now we think empirically, and the spirits that once inhabited the universe have vanished.
The clue is right there in the most famous skeptic's name, Sextus Empiricus.
I'm very, very, very careful with my words.
Jordan Peterson's customary approach to a subject is to take simple, straightforward concepts and redefine them in order to transform their core meanings to suit whatever he is saying at the moment. Even worse, he assigns multiple meanings and contradictory definitions to those concepts, making it literally impossible to know with any degree of confidence what he's actually saying. He does this in order to allow the listener to assign his own meaning to Peterson's words. It's a psychological technique that can be described as preemptive mirroring, as Peterson's rambling incoherence permits the listener to hear what he is seeking to hear and feel that his preconceived views are substantiated by the authority of Peterson's presumed wisdom. Peterson is purposefully saying nothing in order to leave a hole of meaning that the listener will dutifully provide and credit to him. This is why different Peterson fans will almost invariably disagree about what he has said. Peterson says, "When I lecture, I'm not saying what I believe to be the case, but thinking on my feet. trying to extend and clarify my knowledge while also communicating. To the extent that there is any actual content to Peterson's lectures, they are narcissistic monologues aimed primarily at himself. This is why those who have read Peterson's books tend to have a much lower opinion of him than those who attend his lectures and watch his videos. His technique of preemptive mirroring does not work when one can so easily see the contradictions and incoherencies littering each and every page. But when he's on stage, if you react poorly to one of Peterson's positions, you have only but to wait a little while and he will produce another one you will find more to your liking.
Clean up your room.
Peterson's incoherent and self-contradictory philosophy can best be described as Clintonian, as he repeatedly redefines everything from Christianity to God and the very concept of truth itself. Just listen to these absurd, nonsensical definitions he puts forward when asked what he means by God. God is the mode of being you value the most, spirit that is trying to elevate being, that makes everything come together. Truthful speech that rectifies pathological hierarchy. How we imagine and collectively represent the existence and action consciousness across time. The selection mechanism, which judges which men are worthy. Collectively, these statements can clearly be seen to be pure baffle garble. Just string them together and you'll see that they're entirely nonsensical. Truthful speech is a selection mechanism that rectifies pathological hierarchies, which is how we imagine the existence of consciousness trying to elevate being. Bucko. That's nonsense.
I think that's silly. I really do.
And it leads to the obvious question, what makes speech truthful? If Peterson is to be believed, truth is that which serves life in a Darwinian manner.
Like the fundamental axiom that I'm playing with is something that was basically expressed by Nietzsche. And it's a definition of truth. And so I would say, if it doesn't serve life, it's not true.
Or to put it more bluntly and clearly, the truth, the Darwinian pragmatic truth, to be specific, is anything you believe that happens to increase your odds of survival. This, you will note, is a concept that directly contradicts the concept of truth as the dictionary and pretty much everyone else in the history of the planet has ever understood it.
Okay, that makes sense. Except, I would say that God is dead and human beings are like a cancer on the planet.
Thanks to this perverted redefinition of truth, Peterson even concludes that facts are not necessarily true.
Then I would say that I don't think that facts are necessarily true.
But Peterson doesn't just play philosophically fast and loose when it comes to facts, figures, and definitions. He can't even answer a straightforward yes or no question honestly.
Do you believe that Jesus rose again from the dead? Literally.
I find it, I cannot answer that question. And the reason is because, okay, let me think about it for a minute, see if I can come up with a reasonable answer to that. Well, the first answer would be, it depends on what you mean by Jesus.
A historical human being that existed
in a body. And
in a body.
In a body. Do you believe that or do you not believe it? You know, it's not, it's I don't know.
Now come on, is this really the first time that Peterson has ever considered that question? And yet he did manage to answer a related question a little bit more directly. Do you go to church? No. In my experience, the ministers are too frequently lying. I can't stand to hear them say words they don't believe. But how could a man who doesn't even know what he believes possibly know what others truly believe? How can he know they are lying about Jesus when that would entirely depend upon what they mean by Jesus? And how can a man who claims that facts are not necessarily true possibly claim that anyone else is lying? Now, we've recently seen Peterson and public figures on the left who have been elevated and promoted as an acceptable opposition by the mainstream media, the most notorious example being the New York Times' proclamation of the intellectual dark web. That includes Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, and Sam Harris, among others. And the reason that they've been elevated is because their whole job is to prevent young men from moving towards nationalism and Christianity in their ongoing rejection of the neoliberal world order.
That's why I'm talking to them. I'm trying to call them forth as individuals out of the chaos that they're ensconced in.
If you pay attention, you notice that none of these members of the approved opposition are Christians, and more importantly, everything you see come out of their mouths is anti-nationalist.
A person who is living abroad in Japan could be more of an American than a person who's born in Ohio.
Now, It's not always directly anti-nationalist, and Jordan Peterson is much more clever than Ben Shapiro in this regard.
The distance between the typical citizen and the bureaucracy that runs the entire structure has got so great that it's an element of destabilization in and of itself. And so people revert back to, say, nationalistic identities because it's something that they can relate to.
What Peterson does is to criticize globalist institutions like the European Union and the United Nations because he thinks that they are moving too fast, too far for the public to accept.
Because we're not built for static utopia. We're built for a dynamic situation.
But the reality is, his long-term objectives are almost identical to the long-term goals of George Soros and other globalists. That may sound improbable, but in a recent interview with George Soros, the great financier of Antifa and global society rather improbably insisted that he is non-ideological. Jordan Peterson also claims to be non-ideological, despite his globalism, his employment by the United Nations, and his history as a socialist activist. In that same interview, George Soros said that his main concern was that the left has become too extreme, which happens to be precisely the same concern that was revealed by Peterson in what was billed as a debate on political correctness with Stephen Fry, Michael Dyson, and Michelle Goldberg.
And that's what this debate is about political correctness. It's about the left going too far. And I think it's gone too far in many ways. And I'd like to figure out exactly how and when so the reasonable left could make its ascendance again and we could quit all this nonsense.
Jordan Peterson is trying to fix globalism. He's actively seeking to destroy your nation and your faith because he believes it's necessary in order to save the world. So in conclusion, I'll ask you this. For what shall it profit a man if he shall clean his room and lose his own soul? I'm Vox Day. This is Voxiversity.
We are live with a man who I think at this point needs no introduction.
The most influential public intellectual in the Western world.
One of the world's most
Welcome back to the Darkstream, and we are going to discuss, actually it looks like we're actually back into the same stream. So perhaps this is another way to get back to it. So you saw the video, And, you know, the interesting thing about producing it is that we didn't even begin to delve into some of the ammunition that we could have used. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we could have delved into that we didn't. I tried to keep it very light, you know, basic stuff. You know, even somebody who is a Jordan Peterson fan is capable of understanding the significance of Jordan Peterson's 7 nonsensical, contradictory definitions of God. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the comments, if you go to the Voxiversity channel and you look at the comments that the Peterson fans are making, it's really interesting because they're all exactly the same. They're all talking about how, oh, well, you're taking quotes out of context. No, we didn't take any quotes out of context, none whatsoever. They're saying, oh, well, you're just mischaracterizing. No, we didn't. That's why we used his words repeatedly and made sure to address them directly. You know, a lot of that stuff is simply revealing what Peterson says repeatedly. The thing is that most people don't realize it because, as I said, he engages in preemptive mirroring. And so what you think he's saying is not necessarily what he's saying or what he believes. Some of you asked for a link to the video. There's the YouTube link is right there. Let me give you the BitChute link as well. You know, you can share these and give them out to your friends. You know, what Voxiversity is the more in-depth stuff. It's the stuff that we prepare. It's the stuff that is intended to be a self-contained argument, as opposed to these dark streams, which are much more ad hoc and pretty random and more dynamic. You know, we're able to engage in some back and forth. And so, you know, if you look at the things that that he does and that he says, it's very, very clear that Peterson is the Bernie Madoff of philosophy. He doesn't really know what he's talking about. He knows very little about history. He knows very little about theology. He knows very little about philosophy in general. And so, you know, that's why, you know, somebody said, well, would you be willing to debate Jordan Peterson? Of course. I'd be happy to debate Jordan Peterson. There isn't a chance in hell that Jordan Peterson is ever going to debate me, because I would utterly destroy him. I would unmask him. He would no sooner debate me than he was going to answer that question about whether he believes in the literal resurrection. You know, Peterson's whole game is attempting to baffle people with his incoherent, inconsistent nonsense. And so, you know, there's, if you recall, if you read, keep this in mind, I completely destroyed Sam Harris's arguments in The Irrational Atheist and in On the Existence of Gods. Nobody debates this. Okay, Sam Harris himself admitted to me that he hadn't taken some things into account when he made his red state argument. And so, but Sam Harris, who is possibly one of the worst debaters of all the public intellectuals I've seen, I mean, he is such a bad debater. When you read him debating John Derbyshire or Dinesh D'Souza or Doug Wilson, these guys completely took him apart and had him, retreating and claiming that they didn't quite understand exactly what he meant, and what he said wasn't what he meant, and what he wrote wasn't what he meant. So Harris is pretty bad. And the problem is that even Harris was going nuts because Peterson, he couldn't pin Peterson down to a coherent, consistent definition of truth that is at all related to whatever people actually mean. And so, the thing is that Peterson is very intelligent. There's no question. All right. Peterson is actually probably a little bit more intelligent than I am, as far as just straight up IQ to IQ goes. But the problem that Peterson has is that he is crazy. He is absolutely terrified that the world is going to end. He is living in a constant state of fear. That is why he's on psychotropic drugs and on SSRIs. And so because of that, he's concocted this huge sophistical system that basically allows him to function. And it's a sign of his intelligence, but it's a very, very fragile thing. And it's something that, when you're intelligent, then, that's an advantage. But the combination of wisdom, the combination of knowledge, because remember, what did we point out about his level of knowledge? It's very bad. It's very poor. It's all very, very focused on psychiatry and that kind of thing. And so he simply doesn't have very much knowledge, and that's why it's so easy to identify the weaknesses in his arguments. And so and that's why the thing about Peterson fans, and the reason that it's so easy to upset them and unsettle them, is because they don't have, they don't understand that Peterson says 3, 4, 5, 6 different things, that he has all these multiple definitions which are contradictory. And so they think that, oh, well, I know what he says because I understood when he said X. And then all you need to do is show them that he also said Y, Z, W, blue, and 37 about the same thing. And they they start to realize that he's a charlatan and that he's incoherent. And so, the difficult thing is that you have to be, number one, reasonably intelligent, and number two, you need to be reasonably well read to be able to see through Peterson and see what he's doing. And so, look, why do you guys do? Look, Vox, call on Stefan and try to set up a debate, or maybe just discussing with Molyneux. No. If you guys want to see a debate, you guys set it up. I said I'll do it. Okay? I'm busy. I'm trying to finish A Sea of Skulls. We're doing a lot of stuff on the movie front. We've published 19 comics in the last, couple months. We've got new stuff coming out. I'm not going to waste 30 seconds trying to set up a debate with someone who is going to run away from me. You know, Ben Shapiro, people have been telling me, oh, you should debate Ben Shapiro, you should debate Ben Shapiro. I said, fine. Twice, when I was still on Twitter, twice. You know, Ben actually threw out a debate challenge about economics. I said, he wanted to debate a Trump supporter on economics. I said, fine, let's do it. And I said, you know, be happy to, let's go ahead and debate this. Shapiro, of course, ran away. So, you know, why waste your time when you know perfectly well that these guys are going to run away? And not only that, but the very people that were trying to get on that Cortez, that up-and-coming Democratic Socialist Congresswoman, they're trying to get on her, saying, oh, well, you're just running away from Ben Shapiro because you're scared. Well, what the hell is Shapiro doing? Shapiro's run away from Milo. Shapiro's run away from me. Shapiro's run away from Alex Jones. You know? So, anyhow, you know, these guys that are approved opposition, I don't think they're so much controlled opposition. I think they're approved opposition. And most of them are fame whores. Most of them are much more interested in making money. And they're, you know, they want to keep their positions as people in the center. You know, they want to get nice puff pieces about them in the New York Times. You know, so people like that are never going to risk their position. They're never going to risk their reputations by debating somebody, especially somebody to their right, who they know is going to beat them. They're just not going to do that. They're not intellectually honest enough. Because they're not really intellectuals. That's what you have to understand. You know, all you need to do is read what passes for their books. There's a reason why they prefer the video medium. The video medium is much easier to get around, and it's much easier to avoid staking out positions that will later be exposed than writing, and that's why they try to stay away from. That's why you don't see them write very many books. It was also somebody said the other thing is that most people really don't pay any attention to what people have written or what people have done. You know, like somebody said, I mentioned that Peterson was a socialist activist, and somebody said, "What?" You know, it's a fact. He writes about it in his book Maps of Meaning. You know, but of course, nobody actually reads any of this stuff. I mean, it's right there. He's got pages going on about how he was literally a card-carrying Socialist Party activist. He doesn't hide it. So, somebody said, Shapiro is again crowing about the downfall of Trump, reminding me again of how insufferable he is, and also reminding you of how wrong he is. You know, if this was serious stuff, you know, Trump would have ended it already. He has the ability to end it anytime he wants. Someone says, if I could have heard this stuff 6 months ago, Vox would have snapped me out of my Jordan B. Peterson honeymoon period in an instant. Well, then I would encourage you to pass the video around. You know, the links are up there. When people talk about Peterson, encourage them to watch the video. You know, even those who like try to claim, you know, this doesn't matter because you're jealous of Peterson. I'm not jealous of Peterson. Why would I be jealous of Peterson? Because he has one book that has sold very well? Milo had one book that sold very well. Nobody ever claimed that I was jealous of Milo. You know? I mean, Peterson is literally suicidal. His daughter has had this horrible, horrible disease most of her life and had a very difficult time. Why would I ever want that? You know? Peterson, he gets to be on stage and talk and that sort of thing. Hey, I've been on stage. I've been on stage at Glam Slam. I've been on stage at First Avenue. I've been on stage in big clubs with lots of hot women. I'd frankly much prefer my experience in a techno band to standing up talking about lobsters to a bunch of dorks. I mean, come on. Why would anyone want to do that? Yeah, somebody said Cernovich too, right? Yeah, somehow I never hear that I'm jealous of Cernovich. It's always you're only ever jealous of people that you criticize. It's just like people used to say, "Oh, you're jealous of John Scalzi." Well, if I was going to be jealous of anyone's success, I would have been jealous of Umberto Eco's. Those are the books I would have liked to have written. What are your thoughts on Alex Jones taking the same position as Shapiro, saying that he doesn't care if America turns 80% brown as long as they're pro-Constitution? I think he's wrong. I think he's a civic nationalist, and I think he's wrong. There's a lot of people, a lot of good, well-intentioned people who would say the same thing. They're civic nationalists, and they're wrong. They'll learn. Let's see here. I'm a Jung nerd, and he gets Jung out of context often. I'm not a Jung guy, and so I don't know what he gets correct and what he gets wrong. But I am not even remotely surprised that he doesn't get it right. I mean, he doesn't get anything else right. I don't know why he'd get that right. I like what Trevor said. The only intellectual worth being jealous of is Taleb. That's correct. If I was going to have somebody's career, I would want Taleb's. Taleb can do whatever the hell he wants, whenever he wants, and the books that he writes are significant and successful. I mean, Peterson stuff is going to be completely forgotten. He's just basically another. He's the self-help guru du jour. Let's see. This is Alex is struggling to be a real nationalist. Family complications. I mean, as somebody who is identity complicated myself, I understand that it's very, very difficult for most people to be as ruthless as I am, and to ignore, your identity complications and just say, this is true, this is not true. I don't have anything to do with it. What would you say to people claiming you only oppose Peterson because he actively opposes the alt-right? I would say that's obvious bullshit. I oppose people who are liars. I oppose people who are frauds. I oppose people who are charlatans, and Peterson is all three. Honest civnats stop being civnats when they see firsthand how demographics change politics. I don't think that's quite true. I think most civnats stop being civnats when they see their own neighborhoods and their own cities transformed. Most people are not capable of making those abstract leaps that statistics require. Are they going to try and kill Trump? I've heard they already have tried as many as 12 times. So, of course, but they're not going to succeed. Somebody said JBP is another Mitch album. That's a pretty fair comparison. The intellectual value of Peterson's stuff is about the level of whatever that was, 10 people you meet in heaven or whatever. As an identity-complicated person, do you have any advice on whom to read to get a better grip on nationalism? No, I really don't. Nationalism for me is more about paying attention to current events than it is about reading anything in particular. Do you think we will see a major push of the Baha'i faith in the coming years as a one-world religion? No. The Baha'i faith is pretty trivial. So, yeah, actually, that's a good point. If you want to learn more about nationalism, read the Bible. I think people would be surprised to learn what a nationalist document, the Bible, even the New Testament, is. Thoughts on Conor McGregor? None. Coming in late, but nice work on the latest Voxiversity. Thank you very much. And thank you for your support, too. We've just opened up Voxiversity again for support now that we're producing the videos. If it's something that you're interested in supporting, we have, I think, six different levels, 6 different tiers of backing. Why did people think he was a Christian? Because he made lots of noises to kind of indicate that he might perhaps maybe be one. Let's see here. This live stream is twice as many people as on the previous ones. It's not quite true, actually, but yeah, there's a fair amount of interest in Jordan Peterson, and I do think a dark stream on nationalism in the Bible is probably a good idea. Murray thinks that we're just a few years away from race and IQ being undeniable. That's true. How will the general public react? Oh, they already know it. It's not like they don't already know this. If I said that JBP was not a charlatan, would I get stomped on this chat? Probably, especially if you actually offer an argument to try to back that up. That argument is very, very easy to stomp on. So, Gun Ghoul is fantastic, by the way. I'm glad you like it. Gun Ghoul number 2 is actually going to come out very, very soon. It's already done. Just a question of pulling the trigger and getting it out. Let's see. Why is globalism so opposed to Christianity? Because globalism is Satanist. Globalism is simply the political version of the Satanist religion. Are the Chinese really engineering IQ 200 babies? No, but they're trying to. By Taleb, do you mean Nassim Nicholas Taleb? Who is he? I've never heard of him. He's probably, with Umberto Eco's death, he's probably the greatest public intellectual today. I would strongly recommend reading his Incerto series. If much of the public is aware of race and IQ, then why do white liberals still support unlimited migration? Because they don't care about the future. Let's see. Will the upcoming civil war manifest as race war or class war? Neither. It's not going to be a two-sided deal. It's going to be an interest group struggle. Are you jealous of N.K. Jemison's upcoming 4th Hugo Award? Oh, I would love it if she won a 4th consecutive Hugo Award. That would be amazing. So, anyhow, well, that's it for tonight. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video, and make sure that you pass it around, and especially suggest that if any of your friends are still caught up in the Jordanetics cult, I would encourage you to get them to watch it if you can. Have a good evening.